Happy Monday, everybody. Did you miss us? Because we missed you. I missed you too, Mike.
2 weeks off, and I've been sick the whole time, still am. Some kind
Yay.
of head cold thing.
Oh.
So I'm going to sound funny today, like when you're all stopped up here, you don't talk. There's nothing coming through your nose. It's just your mouth.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And you sound all weird.
You do, but I know you have some questions to answer, and people want their questions answered, so let's get right into it. Our first question is from Piglet, who wants to know, what do you think the missing ingredient or ingredients of this year's basketball team is? After the Auburn loss, it is obvious something is wrong.
You know, there are a lot of things wrong, but I think we would start with something that I noticed in the Oklahoma game and the Auburn game is very similar. And what do those two games have in common? Arkansas got out-physicaled. You had two physical teams that just dominated. And in both of those games, Arkansas started off playing pretty well, kind of got away from them a little bit before halftime, and then in the second half they just quit playing. Now, it was worse in the Auburn game, and if you remember in the Oklahoma game, they got down by like 15, 18, and then I think they put in some B team or guys off the bench, and Arkansas came back and got it to within 9, made it look better than it was. In this one, it never got better, it just kept getting worse. And I think Muss put in some guys at the end, and they didn't. You had some people complaining because Bay Fall hasn't been playing. Well, he was in that game, and that's when the thing went worse. So I think there's a definite issue here with getting out physicaled. I think Arkansas's guards are still a matchup issue with bigger teams that have bigger guards and maybe quicker guards. Some have made the point this team is not as talented as the others. I'm not sure that's the case because I'm not sure how you can explain beating, Purdue and Duke without talent. I mean, they looked fine in those games. I thought they looked really good in the UNC Wilmington game leading up to this game. Now, you can read a lot of stuff on the internet that's kind of bad, but you read some stuff sometimes that makes you go, And somebody made the point, can't remember who it was, a guy on Twitter. He was talking about the 7 or 8 days off they had between the Wilmington game and the Auburn game.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can be off too much, too long, too much emphasis on practice, not enough. So if that's a problem, they've entered the stretch now where they're going to be playing 2 games a week from here on out to the end of conference play. So maybe that's not an issue. But to me, they just take time off during games. They're playing well and then they just quit for a while, and you can't do that. All teams do it to a certain extent, but they do it a lot. I also think there's this. When you kind of reinvent a team every year, and it's not complete, but he's been replacing about half the team every year. You're bringing in a bunch of new guys to mesh with the guys that are already here, and maybe when you're looking at these guys, you're looking at them, you're looking at their stats, you're watching video of them, but you don't know what's up here and what's right here. And you don't know that until they get here. And so maybe you've got a mix that's just not working. I don't know. What I see right now, or what I saw in that Auburn game, reminded me a lot of what I saw with the football team in those 3 home losses at the end of the season, where they just didn't seem to bother them. That's your fans. That's your fan base, and you're going to play that way in front of them? Wouldn't you be a little bit embarrassed? Most players would.
I think there are some players who are embarrassed. Chandler Lawson posted a quote.
He mentioned that, and he was playing hard the whole game, but there were some that weren't. So where does the leadership come? Where's Devo? Devo's been doing this for 4 years. Plays this game, doesn't play that game. Plays this game, doesn't play that game. What is that? He's your 4th-year guy. He's got to be that leader. He wasn't a leader in that game. He got a ridiculous foul call where he just shoved a guy, which certainly didn't help. I mean, that's not being a leader. So some of it is maybe they don't have enough 3- and 4-year guys, but again, there's other teams that do this same thing and aren't having these issues. And then I also think we can get too far ahead of where we are right now. They're 0-1. They've been 0-4 before, something like that. So the issue is what comes next, and I'm not sure where they're headed, but I think it's pretty easy to talk about what's going wrong. It's not easy to talk about how it gets fixed.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, but you also bring up years past, and everybody likes to use the the example of years past where they've gone 0-4 in league play and started off on this rocky start. You just can't do that this year. I think that's the difference when we talk about in years past versus this year. This year, the league is just a little bit different where we talk about the level of play.
11 teams probably could get in. They'll probably take 9, so 2 are out at the bottom, and that looks like Arkansas right now.
It does, and so that's where the question comes in is, can this get fixed, or are you going to dig yourself a hole that you just can't get out of? Because starting 0-3 this year compared to years past definitely is concerning for this team. Let's move on because we do have more basketball questions to get to. WV Hog fan asks, do you think the basketball team has too many players that want to be the star and is not willing to play team ball? I was always taught that there is no I in team.
Yeah, I don't think that's the issue. I don't look at these guys and see a bunch of guys that are arrogant or anything like this, or I'm not getting my points. I just think it's a lack of focus. I mean, you play hard in one game, but then you come back and don't play well in the next game, or maybe you're taking time off, like 4 or 5 minutes. You know, you came out and you're on the floor for at one point and you're playing well, then you go to the bench and come back in the next time and you don't. That's just been the issue I've seen all along is lack of consistency. And we saw that with the football team. They'd come out and go 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and then all of a sudden, boom, right down the field, 80 yards, touchdown drive, boom. 80 yards, touchdown drive, boom. And then 3 and out, 3 and out. Consistency is lack of consistency is the enemy of any sports team. I don't care who you're talking about. But also, with regard to the margin of loss, that's embarrassing. It was the worst ever in Bud Walton. But basketball is a crazy sport. Look at the women's game where they've been struggling and they started off 0-1 and then they took a good Auburn team and destroyed them and won by 30.
You mean a good Georgia team?
Georgia team, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Still thinking about Auburn. Beat them by 30. Yeah. And how did they do that? Everything was working. Okay, but what happens now when you come back on Thursday? Does Michaela Daniels hit all those shots again?
Yeah.
And if she doesn't, does that cause them to start jacking up more shots, or do they go, okay, the outside shots aren't falling, let's work more inside? You've got to have discipline that when things that you normally rely on don't work well, you don't completely get off the rails and do other stuff. Absolutely. I think that's another thing that happens with this team is they realize what they're coached to do, but then when maybe it's not working, you just start doing stuff on your own. So I don't think it's arrogance. I think it's just players tend to do that.
They do, and I think there's a lot of kind of comparisons you can make with the women's team and men's team with consistency, right? Because they had that great 40-point win over Georgia with Talia Scott sitting on the bench. Mm-hmm. And so that was really impressive. But like you said before, does Michaela Daniels show up? What kind of Sailor Poffenbarger player do we get today? What about Miriam Dowda? You know, if she doesn't turn it on, it's a very similar situation sometimes with the comparisons you can make with both this women's and men's team. And Mike, what kills me with this men's team is you hear Musselman say in those press conferences, our practices are great. Our practices are great. It's just not translating to the game, which is so strange, right?
I mean, that happens.
Yeah, it feels... what's going on? I wish I was in those practices and could see that.
The few practices I've seen, you know what I noticed? They hit a lot of threes, and then they get in games and they don't hit threes.
True. Very true. Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah, absolutely. S. Giles says 6 weeks until baseball season starts. Hoops is done right. NIT at best. That's a long time to wait for something positive.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's too early to start thinking like that, but you do have to consider it's a possibility. You get spoiled a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Used to being not only in the NCAA tournament, but going at least 2 weeks into the thing. And maybe that doesn't happen this year. And it's not a good year for that to happen because everybody was looking forward to basketball coming out of football, and now it's like, oh, when does baseball start? Well, we're about, 5 weeks away?
5 weeks away? Yeah, I think the other day it was 40 days. So, right, that's about 5 weeks, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I hate to say that, but it's kind of, you kind of have to curb your expectations just a little bit because you don't want to get disappointed at the end of the season. Maybe they do, go into this week, Mike, and get a win over Georgia and Florida. That would be kind of nice.
It would, but easier said than done.
Easier said than done, especially with the competition they have coming up this week. Sherlock Hogg says, explain the responsibilities of each assistant coach when it comes to player development. What are we missing with the departure of Gus Argenal?
Well, first of all, we're not there, so I couldn't tell you that. You'd have to be there watching them work out to understand how that staff interacts. I'm going to assume that all of the coaches have some responsibility with player development. I get the point of the question. Could it be that Argenal is the missing link? No, I don't believe that. You've still got Musselman there. That's not why this team is having problems. All of what we've just talked about, that's what the issue is, not a coach that's not there anymore.
I was there in 1969 asked, Manyfield's release by the NCAA very well could and likely have saved the Muss Bus's bacon this season. We now have Kareem Reed Part 2. What say you?
Well, I think he submitted that before this Auburn game, so he may have changed his point a little bit. I still thought Manyfield was the one probably good thing about that. I thought he played well, played hard, certainly came on after the game and did a good job of saying, hey, we were bad, this is our fault. So he could end up being right with that. Manyfield could end up, when it's all said and done, being the kind of the glue that brings this team back together. We'll see.
He certainly brought a spark before the Auburn game. I mean, we saw that in the 3 games he played. So
that's right.
I think with him, it's kind of interesting because he is really small. Like when you stand up beside him, I'm like, wow. I didn't realize, I guess, when on TV and you watch them play and then when you actually get to stand up beside them, I'm like, he's not as tall as I thought he was. And so I think when you see a player like that, you might get a size matchup with all of these teams in the SEC. They're all big guys. And so you hope that his quickness can overcome that size differential. But I don't know. It seemed that he couldn't get going against Auburn. We'll see what happens against Georgia and Florida this coming week. Hot Dogger wants to know, Sherlock Hogg says, none of the freshmen we get play any real minutes and leave. Where's Bay? This starting over every year is for the Birds, and it's driving me bonkers.
Well, you had those 3 5-star freshmen last year, and they played a lot. Nick Smith Jr. didn't play for a stretch because he was out. But all of them played and mostly started. So you can't say that it didn't happen with them. So it's almost like you're going to get it both ways. If you get 3 good players, they're still freshmen. They're going to make freshman mistakes, but they're good enough to be gone after a year. So then if you're Muss, you go, well, maybe I ought to back off a little bit and go more with
experience.
But in recruiting, go with more 4-star guys so they'll be here for a while and I can develop them. But the problem with that is you don't have time. You're trying to win. So people are talking about what about Bay Fall? Were you going to put Bay Fall in when you're trying to win a game and you're not playing well? And the times I've seen him in there, he looks a little bit lost.
Yeah.
So it's just difficult. The fact of the matter is that the way Musselman is doing this is the way everybody's starting to do it now. It's not just him. The transfer portal, as long as it stays the way it is, you're going to have coaches looking at whatever issues they have at the end of the year and going, I got to have an instant fix here. I got to have an instant fix there. I got to do this. And they're going to do that. They're not going to take the time to say, well, I developed this freshman so he'll be better as a sophomore, or the sophomore is going to be better as a junior. And so those guys, if they don't immediately start contributing, if I'm a 4-star freshman and I come in and I'm not immediately contributing, I may be gone.
Yeah.
I don't know what Blocker's going to do. He's not playing a lot. I think he's pretty good, but he's not playing anywhere near the minutes those freshmen did last year. So what does he do when the season is over? Does he go, look, I apparently am not what they want, so I'm out of here? I don't know. I think it would be a mistake for Arkansas if you don't try to keep him. But again, the question is, are we beyond the point where you try to develop anybody? If you get a freshman, if he can play immediately, you can play, but otherwise, I'm sorry, you'll have to be on the bench. Same thing with, obviously, if you bring in a junior and senior, you expect them to play. Well,
with those 3 freshmen last year, to the point of this question, they were all ready to play. Now, they made freshman mistakes, and we saw that's going to happen with these guys. But Musselman had a team this year. He put together a team, and we've talked about it on the show, where he didn't need to rely on those freshmen.
Right.
He could go to other guys with experience and not rely on those
what
guys.
happens to those 2 freshmen? Do they leave?
I don't know.
See,
I think it would be smart to stay.
This is why I like the question, because it's not just Arkansas. What it suggests is the way things work now is you're solving problems immediately. So if you bring a couple of freshmen in and they can play, fine. But if they don't, we're not going to play you, and then they get mad and leave. So they don't develop. Somebody else develops them. There's some players that have left this program that are playing pretty well right now at other places because they've gotten older and gotten better. Muss didn't want to take the time to have to develop them because he was trying to win. And he was winning with guys that were more experienced. So where does this go? I mean, does this change? And then it's becoming more and more of an issue in football as well. So you get a guy that, I mean, what about UNLV? They had this terrific quarterback, had this great season. He's gone. He hits the portal. What is that? Just no loyalty. Yeah, you know, they've got this really good offensive coordinator. They had a good offense. He developed this kid, made him better. Thanks for making me better. Bye. I'm going to the big time now. Vegas is not good enough for me. I hate that.
I know, and but it's also with the addition of that we talk about the woes of the transfer portal. That's one of them, and then the addition of NIL. Right? If you you're not just a player anymore, right? You're a businessman, right? You have to go where it's going to benefit you as a player as well as financially, right?
That's where we're headed.
That's where we are. Well, that's where we are, Mike. That is where we are.
Yeah, you're right. We're not headed there. We're there.
We are here right now. Hot Dogger wants to know, does the Hog Wild band still exist? I don't hear about them lately. I just remember the band leader running up and down the bleachers during the game. You shared a clip of that recently, didn't you?
Well, the Hog Wild band that he's talking about was in Barnhill, and Barnhill was a different thing. It was constructed differently. You had Jim Robkin, who invented this thing, where they'd be up there playing, and then he would just run and go down the steps and run around and get people on the lower section, and then he would go up some stairs and vanish in through a portal, and he'd come pop back up in another portal because he was looking to find some people that were sitting down, and he would spot them, and then he'd run around, and people would go, where are they? And then they'd spot them, and then here he'd come and he'd get them up. And the goal was at the end of the timeout that everybody would be on their feet.
That's awesome.
And it was a game that he played, and it was fun. Well, that went away. Well, first of all, he left before they got to Bud Walton. And so they had another guy that replaced him and tried to do that, but it just kind of wasn't the same. They didn't have the energy. This guy could run.
I've seen the videos.
I mean, my goodness.
He was like, whew.
He's going up and down steps and running and all this stuff. But then when you went to Bud Walton, it's not constructed in such a way that you can do that. So those days are over. And plus, the band is less because of the DJ impact.
Yeah.
And old guys like me don't like the DJ, but on the other hand, I understand why younger people do, and that's where we're headed, and there's nothing that can be done about it. I think there'll still be a band at most places like Arkansas, but the DJ thing is going to become a bigger deal.
Well, it gives it some atmosphere, and then the recruits, right, when you host recruits, they like it as well. So, again, I know that you don't like it, but you have to know the positive of it from getting good recruits in.
Look, not everything I like, I realize it probably shouldn't be that way. I'm stuck in the mud on some issues. I admit it.
I agree with you on some of the things that you're stuck in the mud about, and I guess what you would say a millennial. So to football now, where Pig Worshipper asks, do you think the online vitriol aimed at Sam Pittman is the cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs category by now? While he hasn't been perfect, what coach is? But the criticism seems way, way over the top. What gives?
In the week or two after the season ended, I was perfectly fine with what was being said on Twitter, especially about him, because I felt like it was deserved. He wasn't the guy that he said he was when he got here. And I even went so far as to do something I've never done before. I suggested that he needed to retire because he said he was hired that if it ever got to the point where they weren't winning or he wasn't doing the job, he would just go off to Hot Springs and take, a small retirement and go over there. And I said, well, okay, it's happened. You need to do it. And then, of course, he didn't. And so I was a little bit miffed at him for that and could understand why fans felt like, Here's a guy that said it wasn't about money, and then it did become about money because they couldn't get rid of him because he had such a big buyout. So then you're left with, okay, you saved your job because you had a buyout that was so big they couldn't buy you out, and they needed that money for NIL. Okay, now what are you going to do with it? And this is where it kind of turned the other direction. Because when people ask me right now, a little over a month later, is it better? I'm going, are you kidding me? Let me ask you a question. Would you want Dan Enos to be the offensive coordinator coming back next year? Would you feel good about that? Even Kenny Guyton. You got to see him do a few games as offensive coordinator. Would you want him to be that guy? Or do you want Bobby Petrino? And I think people understand, yeah, that's the guy we want. And then you start looking at what's happened through the portal, which now they're up to 9th in the portal.
Oh,
see what happened?
Really?
Yeah.
In the transfer class?
Yeah.
Wow, nice.
What happened initially was Missouri and Ole Miss started just blowing everything out of the water, and Arkansas sitting back there at 17th or something, and people are going, look, they're one of the worst in the SEC, and they're just getting blown away. Well, they took their time, but they addressed some issues, and the number one thing is you go after a quarterback. Well, we now know that Bobby Petrino had recruited the kid out of Boise State when he was still at Missouri State. He had his eye on him back then. So this didn't just happen by accident. He looked around and went, I remember that guy, and I want him. And then if you go online and look at some of the interviews that were done by people at Boise that had worked around this guy, they've all said he's a diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
He's a guy that can get so much better. Well, if you got a guy that can get better at quarterback, who do you want coaching him? You want Petrino. Then they've come in and added a speed element at wide receiver. You got a kid out of Texas A&M that didn't play much last year. So why would you want him? If Bobby didn't play him last year, why would he play him this year? One of the things I noticed when I went back and looked at old game footage of Arkansas when Petrino was here, and even the Missouri State game from 2 years ago, when Petrino's receivers get open, they get wide open. I mean, so open there's nobody around them. Now, if you can imagine this kid from A&M getting wide open, first of all, I'm just telling you right now, he's the fastest player that's ever been at Arkansas.
Yeah, he broke a freshman record at Kentucky for track and field,
He ran a 10-200 meters.
Oh.
People said, well, Satinia's fast. Yeah, he's about a 10-4, 10-5. This kid's 10-2. People talk about a 4.4 speed at receiver or running back of 4.40. He's not 4.4. He's not even 4.3. He's 4.2s. He's in the 4.2s. He's that fast.
Wow.
Now, I want to calm everybody down here a little bit. Arkansas track people at Arkansas, which they've had some studs that went out for football. They've never had anybody that's done well in track in a speed event that really developed in football. So this would be kind of a first. But it's going to be interesting to look at in the spring and see how that develops. They've gone out and they lost some wide receivers, but what did they do? They went, if you watch this kid from Utah.
Oh, the Utah running back?
Yes, he's impressive.
We were watching highlights of him this weekend.
He's kind of got size with good quickness and moves, good lateral movement, can do the spin out thing. So that's impressive. They've added an edge rusher. They needed one more edge rusher. If you've seen video of this guy, now he's out of FCS, different level, and people tend to turn their nose up at that. But this kid comes off the edge and just wipes quarterbacks out. Yeah. Just runs over him like
15 sacks.
He's like he runs over him like a bus has hit him.
Yeah.
Just levels them.
Yeah.
So you got that. And I'm leaving some of these out, but the point is they went from around 17 or 18, now they're up to 9th and I think 3rd in the SEC now in the portal.
Wow.
And they're not done with their recruiting of high school guys. They've still got some of those that I think they may add a couple of 3 more. And then there's always the portal after spring football. So I just think when you combine all of that and you've got a new offensive line coach he's in Arkansas. He's all about Arkansas. I don't think he played here, but he coached here before. He graduated. He got a grad degree from Arkansas, so he's an alum. And those guys, it just means more to him. And you know he's wanted to. When he was hired, Eric Mateo said when Sam Pittman called him, it took about a millisecond for him to say yes because he'd been waiting for it to happen. So you want those kind of guys. And by all accounts, he's a really good offensive line coach. They've added 3 offensive linemen. They're looking at 2 more. What if you replaced all 5 linemen from last year? I mean, that might turn some things around for your offensive line. So wherever you look, it's looking pretty good right now. A lot better than it did a month ago.
Yeah, I think they still have some needs that you talked about, and we're going to talk about one of those needs because Rob's 4516 wants to know what in the wide world of sports is going on with the linebacker room, right, Mike? I mean, they do need some linebackers.
I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. What was Otis? Otis does our recruiting. He said there's no way that they wanted Pooh Paul to leave. That was a blow. They wanted to keep him. But the rest of the linebackers, he said Travis Williams was done with those guys because of the way they performed in those last 3 SEC home games. This team got embarrassed in front of its own fans at home, and it was like, I don't want my guys doing that. Now, this is a drastic change because he doesn't have a single guy on that roster that has tackled anybody, I think, in a game.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So he's got this one kid coming in from Georgia.
Yeah, Xavier Sorey.
Yes. And he's pretty good, but he's inexperienced. He's got a 4-star linebacker coming in out of high school, I think 13th ranked linebacker in the country. And then he's got a couple of more that are in the 30s range. You never know about these rankings. The guy in the 2 guys in the 30s range might end up being better than the 14th ranked guy. But Otis says that when spring ball is over and the portal opens again, he thinks there'll be more movement at linebacker too. Now, I just noticed that Alabama had a linebacker that hit the portal.
Yes.
So we'll see if anything develops there.
Absolutely. And I think there's some people are saying, oh gosh, that linebacker room is decimated. We'll see what happens, right? We still have time. But Xavier Sorey as well, even though he didn't play much at Georgia, I got to watch him when I was in the Panhandle because he was playing at Graceville High School.
Yeah,
before
he was really good out of high school.
He was incredible. I mean, the kid was amazing. 2-sport athlete, played basketball as well, was a really good basketball player too. Don't tell Coach Musselman that, but I just think he needed development, and maybe Georgia didn't really, because Georgia is so deep at every position, right? He was more of a reserve linebacker.
Yeah.
So I think here he can be get under Travis Williams, get developed. He could be a star. You never know.
I would say of all the positions right now, that's still the one I question.
Me too. Florida Man says, we have a Florida Man question. Weird. Okay, more than 24 players opted out of the FSU Georgia Orange Bowl. Now I understand why he's Florida Man, which had great potential to be a good game between undefeated FSU and the defending national champions. Outside of diehard fans, is college football going to see a huge decline in interest?
No, I don't think so, and here's why. Because the expansion to 12 teams solves that problem. Would have solved it this year. If you got 12 teams that are getting in, you're not going to have guys off those teams leaving. In fact, it's going to help.
Yeah.
It's going to keep more guys with their team because they know they have a chance to play for the national championship. So, no, I think it's going to actually get better next year. You're always going to have, when you look at the teams that are in ordinary bowl games, non-playoff bowl games, you're always going to have guys that opt out there for whatever reason. You might be on a team that's just had an average season, but you're projected as a 3rd-round draft choice. Okay, your agent tells you you're not going to gain anything by playing in that game. That's fine. But let me just say this. If you're one of these people that doesn't like going to a game, doesn't watch a game because of that, that's your business. Nobody's making you watch them. I watched every bowl game I had time to watch.
I know you did, yeah.
If I was at home and there was a bowl game and I wasn't working, I didn't care who it was. I like watching bowl games. And I think people will continue to watch bowl games.
I think that's an interesting take because the reason why these players are opting out for whatever reason is because, and a lot of them will say, well, we're not playing for a national championship in a bowl game. And so I think that kind of degrades what a bowl game is about. And players, with the addition of NIL and all of these different things, I think we're seeing that there's so many bowl games. There's just so many. Where there could be down the line where we could reevaluate how many bowl games there are, or maybe classify them for different things, or make it something to play for, right?
Well, I guess there's things they could do to try and help these bowl games, but I'm one of these guys. I don't sympathize with people that have that attitude. Nobody holds a gun to your head and makes you watch a bowl game. If you don't like them, don't watch them.
That's
but
true.
Believe me, there are still people that watch them, and even if people aren't watching them, guess who's watching? The players are involved. They have a good time, and their parents and hardcore fans go there, and they have a good time. And who cares if the stands is not full? They don't have to be full for every game. I enjoy it the way it is.
Okay, all right. That's your opinion, Mike. Pig's Feet asks, do you think the mass exodus of players into the transfer portal before their team plays in a bowl game will end the traditional bowl game tradition and only include the top 16 that make it into the playoffs?
No, just what we talked about.
Yeah.
No, that's people are predicting that.
Yeah.
Get lost. First of all, if you say that, you're not looking at a bowl game from the standpoint of the players. Let's say you've played somewhere for 3 or 4 years. You know you're not going to the NFL. This is your last game as a college player. You have a good time. You go on a trip. They make these bowl trips fun. They're all kinds of activities.
They give you things too. They give you stuff. Yeah.
It's something you can remember. Why would you, as a fan, begrudge that? If you don't watch it, that's your business. But let them have it. Don't sit around and say, well, you'll eliminate these bowl games. I'm glad whoever says that, the people that say that, don't have any say in this, because they don't understand athletics and how football works and what it means to some of these guys that aren't going on to the NFL.
But I do kind of where Kirby Smart says, after the Georgia FSU game, he says somebody needs to fix this. Something needs to happen so that we don't have what happened in that FSU Georgia game. And I think you do that. You don't maybe take away the number of bowl games. Maybe you still have as many as you do, but you make it something to play for. So maybe you're not playing for a national championship, but maybe you're playing for a cup of sorts, or something where you can play for something.
Well, you get a trophy for winning a bowl game.
I know, but that's like it's one trophy. Maybe they do a national championship, a college football playoff, the big one, and maybe they do another little tournament of bowl games.
I've always thought that you could do that. You could have the 12 teams, and you could take
12 more, and
12
then
more, and it'd be a second tier, like it would be a football version of the NIT.
That's what I was thinking. I was going to say a football version of the NIT, and then you give it something to play for, so maybe you have less opt-outs. I don't know. That would be a way you could maybe change it. I just think I agree with Kirby Smart, and I don't think I've ever said that on the show before, but I agree. You have to do something to make sure that the mass opt-out thing doesn't happen like it did with FSU.
Well, again, I think you're going to solve that problem with the 12 teams that are in. It's just what happens to the others.
What happens to the others? I mean, you could still have a game. You're on the outside of the 12. It might happen if Arkansas plays a bowl game and there's mass opt-outs. It could happen, right? Referring to a statement Jim Harbaugh made about cutting coaches' salaries to create a revenue-sharing plan for college football players, Dag Nabbit wants to know how much less he or other coaches would take to help compensate players. What do you think of what he proposed, Mike?
Here's the first thing that I think. I doubt he's going to be around. So it's a lot easier for him to talk about coaches should take I wonder if he goes back to the NFL, is he's going to take a salary cut? Because I don't think he is.
No.
I think it's a stupid idea. I think it's socialism. We have a capitalistic system of business in this country. So instead of saying coaches should make less, how about we look at it in a more realistic way? Here's my proposal. My proposals are always better.
Well, I love it, Mike. Tell him.
This blows Harbaugh's dopey proposal into the weeds. How about each conference takes its TV revenue money?
Okay.
You can take the SEC, I don't know how much they get it per year, $200 million a year or whatever.
Yeah.
Each team gets $50,000. And you earmark a percentage of that to go to the athletes in terms of spending money. Now look, one of the things that wasn't in there that Harbaugh said was he said, it hasn't changed since I was a player. You're not paying attention. The cost of attendance scholarship is way different from what it was 10 or 15 years ago. They're already getting almost $1,000 a month. So let's say you gave them a percentage which would allow $2,000 more, so they're making a total of $3,000 a month. That's $30,000 a year, spending money. Imagine yourself as a college student where your room and board is paid for. What expenses do you have? You got $30,000 to just spend in a year? Come on. You think that's bad, that they're being cheated out of money or something? That way it goes to everybody. It deals with the with the women's scholarships, women's athletics, other spring sports. Everybody gets a part of this. And I think that's the way to go. And I don't think, like a lot of people, they're still screwing players because a coach makes $8 million a year. A player should get a bigger shot of that. I want to give you an example. When I was in college, I worked at a department store, a large department store in Fort Worth. I got $1.80 an hour. And we young socialists, because that's what college students often are, we got together one day in the break room because some kid had found out that the guy that ran the department store made $50,000 a year. And he put a calculation on it, and I can't remember what he said. Something like the guy makes 30 times more than we do. That's wrong. It should be brought more evenly. Okay, I think he's nuts. The guy that made $50,000 a year to run that thing was not us. I'm working a little desk in the Boy Scout department. What kind of responsibility does that take? It's a part-time job. He's working full-time. He's responsible for the whole store. Every time a problem pops up here, there, over there, he's got to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And he didn't just pop up one day with that job. He got a college degree. He got his first job, second job, moved his way up the ladder, was good at everywhere he went, and he finally ended up with a job where he's making a lot of money. But if you took the 30 or 40 that they're talking about and compared that to a $50,000 or $60,000 scholarship and went 20 or 30 times more than that, you know what you'd come out with? About 7 or 8 million.
Yeah.
So these coaches are not making it's not the imbalance that you think it is. These are not full-time employees. They work 20 hours a week and they're getting an education. Where did we get off thinking they should already be in the workforce, working full-time, and they deserve to make $150,000 a year? Who came up with that nonsense? I don't believe it. We all have to start in our economy, unless you want to go full socialist, and the day that you leave your parents' house, somebody goes, okay, you automatically get $40,000 a year no matter what you do, because we're just going to do that for you. That kind of economy would blow up in 5 seconds. It wouldn't work. Okay, so this part, the capitalistic system works because, again, you get a job, you get a degree, you get out, you get a job, you get a better job, you get a better job than that, and you go up the ladder, and eventually you're making a lot more than the guy like me who was working part-time behind the desk of the Boy Scout department. You see? See how that goes?
I do
At
see
one
how
time
it goes.
I thought that. I was mad at this guy. He doesn't deserve,
Really?
yeah, he doesn't deserve to make 30 times more than I do. I didn't have a clue what I was talking about.
It's so different for me because I thought of an example in my life. I used to work at a barbecue restaurant and I used to be the hostess. And one day a guy came in and gave me a $100 tip. That's my tip. I earned that tip, right, Mike? I earned that
exactly.
tip. Guess what I had to do at the end of my shift? I had to share my tip with everyone. I was like,
Yep.
this isn't fair. I earned that tip.
That's socialism.
I know, right? I was like, what? I learned that at 15 years
tip.
old.
You earned it. He gave you that tip
That's
for
what
the
I
service
thought
you
too.
gave.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But hey, I learned it at a very young age. I'm like, I don't like this. I don't. That was not fair.
And the truth is, the way the whole scholarship thing works is socialism to a certain extent because everybody gets the same. That's, to me, what should happen. Whatever money you came up with, I don't believe in giving a quarterback $500,000 a year. I just don't. Do you want to turn this into totally professional sports? Then here's what I say to that, if that's what you want to do. All right, let's create a league, and here's the first thing that happens to you, Mr. High School. I have a right to make $500,000 because I'm a quarterback. Guess what? You don't get to pick the school you go to. We're going to do NFL rules, and you're going to get drafted.
Wow.
So I come out of a fancy school in Alabama, and I'm going to UNLV. I don't have any say in that because they're the ones that can draft me. You see how that runs? When you start looking at the other alternative to that, it doesn't look as good as you think it does.
There's a lot of people who have said a college draft may be in the future if all of this gets out of hand and is crazy. I mean, it could happen. It could happen. You never know. G.A. Hogg asked over email, kind of talking about this NIL stuff. Do you believe someday there will be a cap placed on the total amount a school is allowed to distribute to student athletes?
That's an idea. They're going to kick a lot of ideas around. I don't know where this all ends. But I do know that if they don't come up with some solution, they're going to mess up. When I go back 10 or 15 years ago, were there some things that should have been changed? Yeah, they were. The scholarship thing was not right. There was some. We talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they corrected those things. Athletes no longer, if your grandmother dies and you don't come from a family that can fly you back, you don't have to just sit there while your grandmother, you can't go to her funeral and you were very close to her. Now they can step in and help you. So there's a lot of those things that have been corrected. So I just don't know that where we think some of these people think we're headed, that's so much better. I don't think it's so much better. And what these people are not looking at is how it affects the fans. Because most college sports fans that I know aren't NFL fans, aren't NBA fans. They like the college game for a very specific reason. And if you change it and turn it into professional sports, they're kind of going,
Marty Bird's Proxy asks, looking ahead 5 to 10 years from now, what do you see for college athletics? Can you see a single league of 30-ish schools in football, and could it be possible the U of A could be outside that group?
First mentioned this before it ever came up about 2 months ago. Said we could be heading in that direction.
We've talked about it before on the show.
So now it becomes more of a reality when the president of the NCAA proposes it, because he did. Now, we've talked about why he did that. It's because of Title IX. The NCAA is already getting sued over NIL from Title IX people that are saying, wait a minute, this is unbalanced. You're giving all this NIL money to these men and not giving it to the women. And he's right. Someday they're going to have to do it. So what he's saying is it will create a situation where in order to balance this all out with every scholarship, there would only be about 30 or 40 schools that could do this. I think he's exaggerating. I think you could make it where you could somehow figure out where you don't eliminate, sooner or later. We've got the FCS or FBS right now, Football Bowl Subdivision. What's that, 110 schools, something like that, 20?
120.
Okay, that's going to be pared down. But the issue is by how much. And I talked about this a few weeks ago. If you get this snobbish high-stakes poker game, that's what I compared it to. We're guys over here in the corner playing poker, and you go away. We've got money over here, and we're playing real poker here. You yo-yos over there play your little weenie game. And so you would take schools from about 32 on up to 108 and stick them over in their other division.
Yeah, and then you'd relegate teams, right? Like soccer does.
And they're playing in a not as important championship. It would sort of be like the difference between FBS and FCS right now. The problem with that is those 100 schools or so that you're talking about, or 90 or 80 of them, that represents a lot of fans. And you think they're just going to stop watching their team so they go over and watch these high-stakes poker guys? No. They're going to find out that they've isolated themselves. Yeah, we're all the big shots over here, the 32 teams, but our fans are all isolated over here, and other fans are going, well, that's fine. I'm not watching that. I'm watching my team play on TV, or I'm going to watch my team.
Yeah.
I don't think football is going to go away in those other schools just because they get left out. And in the end, if they go to this, and I hope it would happen before they do something like that, people would recognize this is the ultimate outcome of this. Don't be stupid. Don't fall for false, oh, I'm projecting ahead, and yeah, this is a really good way of doing this. Look at what might happen as a result of you doing that. Not saying there shouldn't be changes as a result of all the stuff that's happening, but let's not get completely nutso over this, because you could kill the goose that laid the golden egg. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, you look at soccer as a great example. When their team is relegated, do the fans just go, oh, our team got relegated, we're not going to be fans anymore, we're not going to watch those games? No, they're still crazy over their team. They still watch all the games, but they're rooting for their team to get back, right? They're rooting for their team to be back in the big leagues. So, I mean, that's you kind of look at that example, and maybe that's what they're looking at in proposing this. They're looking at what happens in soccer overseas.
You and I disagree what would happen if they did that. You're saying that if Arkansas is not in it, that we're over here in this weenie division, that we've been insulted, that Arkansas fans are still going to go, boy, I sure hope I'm going to watch this Alabama-Georgia game because I think it's big. When what you also got on TV is a game involving teams that Arkansas plays.
No, I think that you will still be a fan of Arkansas. You will still be a fan of your team, but you will also root to be, okay, we're going to work really hard and get back into that.
I'm not saying they would totally not watch that stuff.
Yeah.
But if I know what I would do if I'm sitting there 5 years from now and I'm not working anymore, and I've got this division and I've got that division, but Arkansas is playing the teams over in this division. Even if Arkansas is not playing a game at that time, I'd rather see two Arkansas opponents play each other rather than some big shot teams that I don't care about anymore.
Sure. And I'm sure there are fans like that overseas in my soccer example that do the same thing, that say, yeah, we don't want to watch them because we don't play in that league.
The best answer is to not do any of this. Like
that
I
would
said,
be the best
it's
answer.
inevitable that some of them will get left out, but I don't. If they approach this the right way, and all they have to do, I'm telling you, this whole thing is a result of the NCAA being afraid of lawsuits. Go back to the original lawsuit that was lost. It didn't have anything to do with athletes have a right to just automatically get money, and schools have a right to throw money at players, and you can use money to recruit. It didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with the fact that the NCAA was collecting royalty fees off a video game, and speaking of which, there's going to be a new one finally announced, and guess what?
The trailer's coming out.
The picture of the image of those players in there, they're going to get money off of it. That should have been done all along. That's a real use of NIL. So if you do that, and you make sure players have got some spending money, which they've already done that, and you might add a little bit to it.
Sure.
You don't have to create a situation where a player, I have a right to make $300,000 no matter what. Okay, go sue. Because that's what I think is going to happen if the NCAA ever stepped in and said, you can't use NIL money to recruit. Let's let some smart guy from Tennessee that says, we've got a state law in this state saying that you can do that. This wasn't about a state law. It's about a private organization, the NCAA, and members are saying these are our rules. Doesn't say you can't do that, you can't make that money. Go make it somewhere else in some other form of athletics or some other division or whatever that you may want to create. But as long as we're doing this, we don't want buying of players, because even in the NFL, they have this concept. You don't buy championships.
Yeah.
They got a salary cap for that. But for some reason, it's supposedly okay, and that's where we're all headed. That's why NIL has gone nuts, because schools like A&M and SMU is going to get involved in this, and Ole Miss has gotten involved in it now. They're all sitting around trying to figure out, oh, let's get some more money and let's just buy a championship. If you have to buy a championship, I don't want it. I do not want it. If that's the way you want it, because you had more money than this school over here, you didn't have better coaches, you just bid for better players, and you got a bunch of players that were just money hungry. Come on, who wants that?
Nobody does, Mike, but that's what we have right now because of everything that you just said. That's what we have.
Then just start enforcing your rules and let somebody sue, and I promise you, you will win.
I don't know about that. That's why.
Because you have to go back to the original Supreme Court ruling. They didn't say anything about any of this stuff that's going on right now. That ruling just said if you try to sell a product with a player's image or likeness on it, and you're making money off of it, you got to give some of it to them. Yeah. That's all it said.
That's true, but I'm telling you, that's exactly what the NCAA is afraid of. That's the reason why Hunter Yurachek and other ADs went to Congress members, went to D.C. and said, hey, we need some help because they're not doing anything. They're not helping us. We need help. We need somebody to step in and say, hey, if you get sued and this case comes to the Supreme Court, we're not gonna do anything. We're not gonna hear the case, right?
Well, then get rid of the NCAA and get an organization that's got its own rules and will back it up with attorneys that are prepared to deal with the lawsuit.
There you go. That is a great point, Mike. Hang 10 Hog wants to know our final question of the day. What is your favorite behind-the-scenes memory from the 1977 football run that should have been a national championship? I can tell you my worst, watching Earl Campbell when UT played the Hogs.
Okay, my worst was I was working for a television station that would not fly us there. There was me and a photographer, and he was working the late shift down in Fort Smith. So I drove down there and picked him up at 10:30. He walked out the door. We've got the car. He gets in the car. We now have to drive 1,300 miles to Miami, and it's about an 18-hour drive, and we could not afford to stop somewhere. So I started off driving, drove till about 1 in the morning. He got in the back of the vehicle and slept. Then he got up and drove, and we just changed shifts like that. And the only thing that kept us going was we had this little dopey video game. It was an early football video game.
Oh, yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
And we played that because the other guy's driving and you're kind of supposed to be asleep, but you can't sleep all the time. So we drive all the way down there, and I'm like, oh man, I'm dead. When we get there in time for the Orange Bowl Media Day, this was the highlight, because they didn't do it back then the way they do it now. Now you'd have a press conference. 6 guys sitting up there on a podium with a coach, right?
Yeah.
And you'd talk to the guys for a while and they'd leave and then you get the coach. This was every guy on the team is out on the field. First, they started with Oklahoma, and so we're all out there with Oklahoma. We had an hour to go talk to anybody we wanted. You just go get them. They had name tag. If you don't even know who a guy is, he has his uniform on. He's got a name tag on. You just go up and interview him. Anybody you want. They're just standing there. And then they all leave, and Arkansas comes in, and you do the same thing. And we had so much fun doing that. Aww. What I remember is Steve Little was playing practical jokes on media people. He would give them incorrect information and tell, go talk to that guy over there, blah, 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 and he'd tell him stuff, and the reporter would go over there, and the guy would go, what? What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. And it was just funny. It was fun. I really enjoyed that. But the thing about it was, when I had gone through that whole process, that whole 2-hour process, I knew Arkansas was going to win, because you had the impression after being out there on the field with all those OU guys, they didn't have a care in the world. We're going to win this game. Arkansas's lost 3 of its best players. We're better than they are anyway. Yeah, we'll win this game. You started dealing with Arkansas, and there was a confidence out there that you just could feel. There's a guy right now who was a deep snapper on that team. He works at a local store. I see him all the time, going in and talking to him. He's from Crossett, Arkansas. Mike Birchfield is his name. And I've talked to him about it. He said, we knew we were better. And all this stuff about OU got upset. It was because, they're claiming that Larry Lacewell, the defensive coordinator, Barry Switzer, was running around with his wife during the thing, and he got mad, and so he gave Lou Holtz the game plan. All these excuses OU people made for how Arkansas was able to win. It's all nonsense. Arkansas beat them because they were better. And the only team that was better than them that year was Texas, and they happened to get beat by Notre Dame, and so that's the only reason Arkansas didn't win the national championship. But that's my memory of that team. It was fun going down there. The drive down there and back was not fun.
Yeah, that does not sound fun. How long was that again?
18 hours, maybe.
Oh, I don't know if I could do 18 hours in a car.
No motel. Didn't have money for that. Sleep
gosh.
in the car.
Wow, that is impressive. We'll have to talk about that off the air, because I want to hear more about that story. But that's going to do it for Ask Mike this week. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.